the meeting, and they can participate if and when they arrive.
Okay,
So
so
we'll call
I've
this meeting. Go ahead.
sorry, I was just going to do a quick roll call, but I've got Bob Lyons, Don Knorr, Carl Stump, and Susan West in attendance.
Correct. So that gives us a quorum and we can do business.
Robert's here too.
Okay.
Oh, hey, Robert, missed you.
Robert.
All right.
All right. Our first item of business is minutes of the June 22nd meeting.
I'll move
Move
approval.
approval.
Oh,
That was
second
Don
then.
and, okay, I'll put down Susan for moving and Don for second.
All right. We have a motion to approve the minutes and a second. Is there any discussion on the minutes? Hearing none, those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, nay. The ayes have it, and the June 22nd, 2020 minutes are approved. Number 2, Middleton Center proposed temporary streetlight removals. I see Brian Henn is here. Hello, Brian. Welcome.
Hello, thank you.
And Sean, do you kind of want to walk through this and give us a little bit of an overview of where we are with it?
I'll try, and I'm glad that Brian's here because he knows the nitty-gritty of it. Our lead crew member of our streets crew, who also happens to be an electrical engineer and does a lot of our signal and street lighting work, met with Brian, is my understanding. But along Middleton Center Phase 3, which is at the northwest corner of Parmenter Street and Terrace Avenue, there are a number of those sort of low-level streetlights, the pedestrian scale streetlights, and then a couple of intersection streetlights. Maybe I should jump to the diagram here. Brian gave us a diagram here of which streetlights are connected and how they're connected. Scale is unfavorable. So in effect, over by Aurora Street, there would be a couple of streetlights, I'm sorry, west of Aurora Street, there would be a couple of streetlights left on, and the rest of that string all the way down Terrace Avenue to and including Parmenter Street and up to the tracks on Parmenter Street would be dark if nothing else is done. And this is through, I want to say May, next May, while the construction's taking place. And in previous phases of Middleton Center downtown, we've also taken out the low-level streetlights during construction and just left the bases in, which helps a lot with material handling and protection, so they're not listing or getting dinged by construction equipment or hauling activities. But here, that's a pretty long frontage on a street, which isn't my primary concern as much as the intersections, which is really why we're here. So some of the options that Brian laid out for us are number one, to put junction boxes on these bases, because these will just be basically ground level concrete bases with nothing else. If we put junction boxes on them, the conductors could remain energized, and these street lights at Parmenter Street and at Aurora Street could remain lit, and these would effectively just be protected by some sort of drums or barrels or whatever set over the bases. We need to keep dirt out of those conduits anyhow, so somehow they need to be kind of covered and protected. So that's one option, put a junction box on before covering them with something protective. A different option that Brian mentioned, and each of these has some downsides. I mean, anything that we put over it to protect it is subject to being disturbed and or exposed at some point during construction. So the second option is just run a ground level conductor in conduit on the ground, bypass all of these bases and feed power to the streetlights that way. A third option would be to set a temporary generator and power the streetlights that way. It would have some connection there that would be potentially exposed to someone fooling around with it. And a fourth option would be to just turn these things off and leave them dark till May, which has some potential safety risk for pedestrians crossing the street, especially as we get into winter and it's dark most of the time. So
is
those
it
were
the,
the four options. Oh, sorry, Don?
yeah, is it the intent to put those light poles back up once the construction is done?
Yes. The bases will remain where they are if all goes well.
Okay.
A couple of them may need minor grade adjustments. So we've got a detail for how to do that, which we already used in phase one. But for the most part, yeah, we just want to get them out of the way and store them for protection's
And
sake and put them back.
none of
later.
this is city cost, I take it,
That's
at this
correct.
point.
Yep.
Okay.
Well, I don't think that leaving the intersection dark is a viable option. That's kind of a skitsy intersection right now anyway. The fence goes out far enough that you, if you're traveling east on Terrace, have to get pretty far out into that intersection before you can see around the construction fence, which, if I'm not mistaken, has a couple of advertising banners on it for the construction companies. And I think leaving that dark would be a safety hazard for vehicles as well as pedestrians.
It may, I've already sent a note over to T-Wall about some of the banners. There's a state law that went into effect a few years ago, effectively saying that banners can be hung on the full perimeter of construction site fencing, except where there's a local ordinance for safety reasons that would preclude some section. And we do have a vision corner clearance ordinance. So I passed a note off to T-Well, and he said, this is Scott T-Bon, who manages a lot of their construction work, that he'll coordinate getting a couple of those sections cleared back up along Parmenter Street.
That would help.
Yeah, I agree.
This is Robert. I agree that we need light there in the dead of winter. If this is going until May next year, we already hear complaints about how people have trouble stopping, coming down Parmenter, heading northbound. And I think for both pedestrians and drivers, being able to see what's coming ahead or is probably a good thing. So I would not entertain the idea of just leaving it dark. So I think finding ways to power at least those two light poles onto a kitty corner corners would be necessary. How that's done, I'm not as worried about whether it's a generator or running power cords places.
I would go along with junction boxes on top of those bases. A, it protects the conduits that are there, covers them. B, it assures everyone that the wiring is still good, and that would be more Brian's concern than anybody's, I think. If the wiring fails, he'll be digging it all up and trying to figure out what's going on anyway. If you just put an exposed conduit on the ground, it becomes a tripping hazard. So I would go for the junction boxes, and putting a portable generator out there, that just, no one will keep it fueled. There'll be complaints that the lights aren't on at night because somebody didn't put gas in the generator. So I think maintaining the existing circuitry is good.
The noise issue for a generator?
Oh God, that'd be even worse. Yeah, a lot more complaints for that, Carl, I agree.
Yeah, I could envision that too. I know we're going to have to run one, the contractor will have to run one in the short term here because there's groundwater in the hole they're trying to dig, so they'll have to run a pump all night. But with a quiet enough generator, that's as good as we can do, I think. But I think if it's from now till May, that would be frowned upon.
I think if I can jump in here, I think we can most definitely try the junction boxes on top of the poles. That's not a problem. We will be reworking some of those as far as like grade goes. So I'm not sure, there may be temporary outages in that intersection. I would say maybe a couple days at a time. If that'd probably be the most, more likely just a day off, and then would have them back up by the night. Second option would be an exposed conduit, some type of PVC along the curb. The construction is coming right up to that curb. That's the only reason I would kind of hesitate to put junction boxes on there, because if they are hit, it could damage the live wires. And at that point, it would be a service call after hours to come in and try and get those back up and running. Where a conduit may have a better ability to kind of stay out of the way all the way along that curb line.
Would the conduit be above the curb or in the gutter, in effect?
We could definitely fasten it to the top of the curb. I would have to see where that lands.
I thought, Brian, the intention was to preserve these bases for reuse and the electric and water lines that are associated with them.
Yes, as much as we can, we will. As you all probably know, construction is never a guaranteed. I can keep that safe. I can put as much as I want around that, but if somebody decides to drive over it with heavy machinery, we're kind of stuck in that situation of just repairing it.
Same thing would happen with PVC bolted at the top of the curb. That could be even worse.
Yeah. We can definitely do the junction boxes. If that is the decision of the committee to do the junction boxes on top of the existing poles, the light pole, actually then yeah, the one by Terrace Avenue, and I'm not sure what this other street is that comes up into the middle of the site. That would also be energized as well. So that would be lit as well.
At Aurora Street there, yeah.
Aurora.
That would be a real advantage.
Okay.
Yeah, so I guess I would make that motion that we direct.
Stop. Don't direct anybody.
Well, what do we do?
Their recommendation to put junction boxes on top of the bases.
Okay.
We as a
Yeah.
not direct
Recommend to council.
Yeah, recommend to council. Does this go to council?
Well, this really can be a committee level decision. It
Okay.
doesn't involve
So take the
financials or
recommendation for
transfers.
junction boxes, not ours.
So I'm sorry, I missed that, Don.
We do not want to direct or recommend. We would accept their option of putting junction boxes on top of the base.
So we note that is the preferred direction, maybe coming
We
from.
don't prefer anything. I mean,
Okay.
We don't want to own this.
Wow. Okay.
We
It's
accept their recommendation.
the contractors.
Yes.
Ours.
But I think it should specifically note that junction boxes is the direction that has been proposed.
Yeah, we accept
Yes.
their.
Okay.
Maybe we'll support the contractor's option.
Yeah, that would be good.
Settle on that. Okay.
Thank you, Brian.
Thank you. One last question. As long as we've made the decision for junction boxes, is it okay as of this time to remove those lights, the light poles for construction?
I would say yes.
Okay, good deal.
Do we, Sean, you want a motion on this, I presume, don't you? Robert, did you make your recommendation in the form?
I'll second it.
And Don
Yeah.
seconded it?
I did make a motion, and I leave it to other people to tweak what I meant to say.
Worded appropriately. All right, there's a motion and a second to accept the contractor's recommendation of junction boxes as a solution to keeping that intersection lit. Is there any further discussion on that issue? Hearing none, those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, nay. The ayes have it. Motion is carried. Thank you, Brian.
Thank you very much.
Okay. All right.
All right, well, let me get back to our agenda here. Okay. So our
All right.
next item.
Third item on the agenda is Mayflower Drive and Hubbard Avenue reconstruction.
Right. Once again,
Agreement
we
for
got
engineering services.
3 proposals out for our engineering services, one which came back with a proposal slightly in excess of our budget. The other 2, and again, these are all from highly qualified firms. The other 2 were in the same ballpark for cost. They had somewhat different hours put into it for staff level effort. Oddly, MSA had the most hours listed, but the lowest cost, compared to Beerbecker anyway. I think both of the Beerbecker and MSA proposals have a really favorable cost. I think Mead and Hunt's was slightly more than we were expecting. But again, some of the things I picked up nicest in MSAs was, or most favorable anyway for me, is that they're looking at critical path items early on, or telling me that they will. I think all of them would. This is a pretty fair-sized project to manage in a pretty short time frame. So trying to figure out what happens when is going to be important on this one.
Well, yeah, as I saw it, MSA was at around 51 something.
Yeah.
Verbicker was about 7,500 more than that, and Mead and Hunt was, yeah, like you said, maybe a little bit outside of the ballpark for us today. So unless somebody saw something that I missed, I would propose that we go with the low bidder of MSA.
Is that a motion, Robert?
Sure, I'll make it as a motion. I propose we recommend MSA at 51 plus some change.
All right. Is there a second to the motion?
Carl Stump seconds.
All right. We have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
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 Those opposed, nay. The ayes have it, and we will be submitting that as our recommendation of the Finance Committee and the Council.
Okay.
Okay.
Number 4 on our agenda is an amendment to the design that we started already for Parmenter Street reconstruction in the downtown area, along with part of Elmwood Avenue and Aurora Street north of Elmwood Avenue. But as our 5-year plan changed a little bit, as staff, we want to add in 2 more blocks of just resurfacing work, not full depth replacements, but resurfacing with some curb and gutter adjustments and casting adjustments and or replacement, just to kind of finish up the downtown. Those extra little blocks on Parmenter Street, south of Terrace Avenue, up to South Avenue, on the north face of that hill is in pretty poor condition for pavement. And Elmwood Avenue, west of Aurora Street, over toward Cayuga, is also a little bit older, got a little bit beat during the Middleton Center construction, and also could use some resurfacing. So we'd like to tie that all together, and our 5-year plan now contemplates that. But rather than doing it as 2 separate projects, we'd like to engage Strand to just roll it into the big project now that it's been pushed back by a year.
When is that going to be scheduled for work now, Sean?
That's scheduled now for next year's construction.
Next year. So
It had-
this,
It had been set for this year. I'm sorry. Let me think about that. Yeah, 20.
It was originally scheduled for this year,
For
but
this
T-Wall
year.
came in and pleaded with us not to do it while he's constructing phase
Phase 3, yeah. So next year. And so we want to finish design this year.
okay,
I move we recommend Strand for the additional $6,500. That seems awfully reasonable for 2 additional blocks of work.
all right.
Yeah,
there's
if
a
it were
motion.
standalone, we'd never get that.
Yeah.
This is
Okay,
Robert.
second.
I'd second that.
Okay. We have a motion and a second to recommend Strand Associates in the amount of $6,500 for the additional design work. Any further discussion? Hearing none, those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, nay. The ayes have it, and that will be our recommendation to the Finance Committee and the Council.
All right.
Item last.
Exactly. And we have Ryan Wood with Strand Associates with us. And I'm guessing this phone number is Dave Sarbacher. I'm going to ask if he can unmute and join the conversation here. In fact, maybe I'll let Dave give you the 30-second overview here, but these are EPA required filings, certificates, essentially, that we're planning for emergencies. Want to give an overview, Dave?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yep.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, it's a follow-up basically to the 9/11 EPA study that they wanted to do for safety, resiliency, and those types of things. So it's just an update of an older document that they want a little more information. Ryan might have a little bit better technical explanation.
Yeah, I can dive into it a little bit. Yeah, there was a vulnerability assessment and ERP that was required in 2002 after 9/11. This updates that with more threats, deeper analysis, and then also it rolls into a 5-year requirement where this is going to have to be updated every 5 years, whereas the last one was just kind of, you did it back in 2002, put it on a shelf, and half the clients I talk to don't know where their ERP is that they did in 2002. So generally what we're doing is it's an EPA required risk and resilience assessment. And that's going to basically look at all of your infrastructure in your water system. And, you know, it's going to look at your wells, your well houses, your metering stations, your tanks, your booster stations. And then the other thing it looks at, which the city is doing on their own, but will incorporate into it, is cyber security, which includes both your SCADA and then also your financial data as well. And basically what we look at is what kind of threats are there, both, you know, terrorist type threats, insider sabotage, natural disasters, you know, all those types of things we look at with respect to each of your kind of critical pieces of infrastructure, and we look at it with respect to water quantity, water quality, pressure, you know, things like that. And then at the end of the day, we assist you guys in preparing a response plan for, you know, potential threats. And also it includes some capital improvement projects that the city may want to undertake if there's, you know, a high level risk that's identified that could potentially be mitigated, before that threat materializes. So it's kind of a summary. I can go into more detail if anyone would like me to. And it's due, your risk and resilience is due in June of next year. And then the ERP, which is emergency response plan, is due 6 months after that. These tend to take about 3 to 4 months to complete. I'd say half the effort is going to be ours, and the other half we'll end up giving the city homework because it's your guys's system, and it's going to be your input that goes in there as well. So, these can be done quicker, but if it gets passed out to several people, then it can, take just a little bit longer too. So we would anticipate to start sometime this fall. So that's what I've got.
Perfect. Thanks,
Right.
guys.
Has Strand done these assessments on behalf of other communities as well?
Yes, this is new as of this year. So communities that are over 100,000 people, theirs were due March 2020. Communities that are 50 to 100,000 are due at the end of this year. And then for whatever reason, you guys are considered a small system because that's anywhere between 3,300 and 50,000 customers, which is where you guys fall in, and yours is due later. And I just say we're probably doing we're underway on about 10 of these in Wisconsin, and then our Joliet offices and Kentucky and Ohio. We've got quite a few going on there as well. I would say that by September, we'll have done about 20 of these, but everyone's kind of in the same boat here where, guidance was just kind of getting finalized at the beginning of this year. So nobody's done a ton of these yet just because they're new. So.
All right. So I was just searching for something perhaps by way of a cost comparison for this study, but it doesn't sound like there really is much data out there that would tell you that.
Yeah. This falls in line with what we're doing. The EPA has come up with an alternative to what we're doing. And Dave and I discussed this where you could do it for less, but you don't get the detailed threat analysis and the capital improvements plan and things like that with it. I'm doing like 5 of these right now, and I would say over half of them are doing kind of the full one that we're doing right now. And then I've got 2 or 3 communities that are in the 4,000 to 6,000 people range that just don't have the budget. And they're doing the one that's in the $25,000 range. But for what we're doing, this generally falls in line with what we're doing
Okay.
for everybody else. So
This is Robert. a quick question, Ryan, it sounds like there's going to be, as you said, homework for Dave and other city staff from our end to supply information, and then there's the work that you guys are doing. At the end of the day, is the final product that you're creating the document, the report that the EPA is expecting, or is it a report to the city that then the city has to take information from that report to actually respond to the EPA?
So this time around, because nothing that we're doing is eligible for FOIA. So the DNR and the EPA don't even want to see what your plan is. They require you to complete it, and then there's a certification that I think we both have to sign. And all we do is sign that certification and send that to the EPA. But the document that is created stays with you guys.
Okay, great. Thank you very much.
All right, any further discussion or questions, committee? If not, what would you like to do with this matter?
This is Robert again. I would recommend to Finance and Council that we move forward in an amount not to exceed $44,300 to be spent with Strand to move forward with this report.
All right, we have a motion. Do we have a second to the motion?
Parallel second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion?
This is Robert. It says it's to be funded by the water utility. Does anybody know if, I know that the water utility has some funds, but sometimes they're spoken for. Is this a surprise bill? Does anybody know if this is something they were expecting?
Dave, did you want to take that? I'm sure it's not its own capital fund, but
No. Yeah, it came in after budget time last year. So, this would be from water utility revenue, revenue on hand.
Budget.
Yeah.
Okay, well then.
And there are sufficient funds, if that was the word.
Yes, there is. Yeah, and there is sufficient funds.
We'll let other committees deal with those details, I suppose. So no further questions from me.
All right, any further discussion or questions?
I have just one question, and it's only tangentially related to the topic. But Dan, Cody, I saw you joined the meeting. Will you be voting on this? Did you get enough information? I'm sorry, I missed most of that.
I said I had to switch computers to get in. Can you hear that?
Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
Did you hear enough? Would you be voting on this or abstaining on this?
I will vote.
Okay.
Then if there's no further discussion, if there are no further questions that committee members have, we have a motion and a second to recommend $44,300 with Strand and Associates to the Finance Committee and the Council. Those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, nay. The ayes have it, and that will be what we will do.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Right.
I think
Thanks,
that
Dave.
brings us to
Thanks,
the end of
Ryan.
the road.
Well, then this is Robert again, making a motion to adjourn.
And is there a second to the motion?
I can second that. This is Dan.
Okay. A motion and a second to adjourn. Any discussion? Hearing none, those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, nay. The ayes have it, and we are adjourned. Thank you all. See you next trip.
Perfect. Have a good
Everyone
night.
have a
Night,
good,
everyone.
good night.
Good night.
Thank you, everyone.